My name is, well, actually, my name is Louis Paul John Epifanio Palenzuelo Robles Jr. But you can just call me Louie, which is what I'm a member of the Juaneno band of Mission Indians. I can trace my family to our village of Panhe, which is at Christianitas Road there beside Camp Pendleton. And my great-great-great-great-grandparents, Macaria and Bienvenuta, were born there, and were baptized at Mission San Juan Capistrano. And Mission records show that our tribe was one of the first peoples encountered as the Portola expedition came north. That was the first ground expedition, land exploration. Of course, Cabrillo came through in 1542, encountered this whole bay, this whole area here. He saw the native fires and named it the Bahia de Fumes, the Bay of Smokes. Later, Vizcano came and stopped at Catalina Island. Our traditional name for Catalina is Pimu, is what we call Catalina. We call Pimu. Limu is Santa Cruz Island. And there was a lot of travel between the islands in big plank canoes called a tiat. And there's here on this side, there's lots of steatite, soapstone found. Soapstone there's a quarry of soapstone on Catalina, and that particular stone has been found throughout this area. There was a trade network. It didn't just go up and down the coast, also followed the rivers. So in the desert tribes, they find some shells that are unique to this area. An ExperTalk, I was a little like, oh my goodness, I wonder who's going to be there. Yeah, I wonder who they're going to have talk. So this is going to be a little more of, I'm going to sing you some songs. I'm going to tell you some stories. When's the last time you had a good story told to you, you know? And I even took the leap and I actually turned off my cell phone. Not on vibrate, not on anything. I actually turned it off. It's so funny, we've gotten so used to that. And I'm like, we used to do this all the time. I think this generation, we can do that more than. Sometimes I have to hold my nephew and said, look me in the eye, we're going to talk. Don't text me from the other room. You come here and talk to me. And I'm turning more and more into my parents. They say it happens, and then you start living it. And you're like, oh, they were right. I'll start in the very beginning, our creation story. Our story tells us that in the beginning was just night, Nokuma. Nokuma was night. And Nokuma created the world. He created the land, created the water, he created the plants. At that time, the ocean was just one body of water that ran in a big stream, the whole circumference circling the earth. And all the beings that lived in the water were all crowded in there. Now the earth, at that time, it was wobbly. And so Nokuma put in the center a great black stone called the tosalt to balance the earth. At that time, all the creatures that we know as fish were all crammed into that one body of water moving, and they're saying, there's not enough room for all of us here. Why don't you go live on the land? And they said, I'm not going to live on the land. You go live on the land. So they couldn't decide what to do. And then the largest of the fish, the largest giant fish, swam all the way down to the center of the earth. And he brought up that stone, and it burst open. And when it burst open, it was full of salt, and it was bitter. And it filled that water, and then the water overflowed, and it filled into the low-lying areas, and they became oceans. And then there were lakes that were freshwater. And then the fish decided amongst themselves who was going to live in the salt water and who was going to stay in the fresh. And so then there was room for all the creatures from the ocean. The Chumash call the dolphins their brothers, and they have a wonderful story that's called the Rainbow Bridge. At that time, the people lived on the island of Limu, Santa Cruz Island, and it was a beautiful island, and it was something for everyone, but it got a little crowded. So the elders came together and said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, well, let's pray, let's ask let's ask Oktumaknawat. And Oktumaknawat, he's the mystery behind the sun. They said, let's ask Oktumaknawat what we should do. And he said, split your families into 2 groups, all ages. One group is going to stay here, and another I'm going to show you where you're going. Pack all your belongings and come down to the shore in the morning. Well, so the next morning, the family group split up. They packed up all their belongings and they went down to the shore. And it had been raining. And they said, well, how are we going to get over there to that land, our new home? How are we going to get there? And Oktumaknawat came down out of the rain clouds, and over came a huge rainbow that extended from the island of Limu over to the land. He said, you're to walk over. Take the little ones by the hand, carry your elders, but listen to me. Don't look down. Do not look down. You'll get dizzy and you'll fall. Follow the rainbow and it will take you to your new home. Well, the people, they said their goodbyes because they weren't sure if they were going to see them again. They start making their way up the rainbow bridge, over higher than they'd ever thought they'd ever be. And of course, some of them started to look down. And as soon as they looked down, that solid rainbow under their feet start changing colors, and they got dizzy. And as soon as one looked, of course, the other had to look. And the people started to fall, and they were tumbling, and they cried out, help, oh, Oktumaknawat, we're sorry we didn't listen, help. And then they hit the water. Well, Utmash is Mother Earth, she's the soil. And she heard and she said, Oktumaknawat, these are good people. They just didn't listen, but they're good people. You need to help them. So again, Oktumaknawat waved his hand, and the people were falling, twisting down in the water. They were going so deep, trying to hold their breath. And then they felt their bodies getting tighter, and their arms that were flailing soon started to touch next to them. And then they found that they could breathe. And then they went to the top of the surface and they jumped. And then the people on the shore looked and they saw the first dolphins. And they said, that's why the Chumash believe that those are their cousins. They call I'll share with you a song. This is a song that was taught to me, and it's called, appropriately enough, it's called a dolphin calling song. The native people of Southern California, of all of California, actually there's only one tribe that traditionally plays a drum. And they're up in Northern California in their longhouses, and the drum is actually embedded into the floor of their ceremonial structure, and they play it with a log. They bam, bam, bam. It's really fascinating. But drums were introduced here. Drums were brought in. The native people of California, we played gourd rattles. These are hollowed out gourds, and then they're filled with the seeds from palms. So a gourd rattle was one of our main musical instruments. We played flutes that were made out of bird wings. And then this is an elderberry clapping stick. And you can see it's elderberry. We like elderberry because when the center dries out, you can hollow it out. And then you just split it, and our songs sometimes would go on for hours just to the beat of this. For special ceremonial events, a turtle shell rattle was used. And the cordage is it's a magic trick. I didn't know where that came from. Right, for my next trick, yeah. Right. So, and this is just filled with olivella shells that were found along the coast. You can imagine the life of the people along the coast, because all of this was marsh. Traditionally, this was all marsh, and as the tide comes in, it was just an abundant food source. You'd just go in a little further to the canyon lands, and there'd be rabbit, deer, other hardier meats. The main food source, though, in the bleak months was an acorn. The acorn fall was the biggest celebration because people went up into the canyons and harvested the California live oak and the acorns, which was pounded into it was quite a process. you'll see a lot of grinding rocks. That's the grinding rock stones, and families own those. Those belong to families, and every year they would return to that grinding rock, and they'd pound the acorns into a much that we called wiwish. Just like Hawaiians have poi, we had wiwish. It's very high in tannin, so it's really acidic, it's really bitter, but you run water through it to take it down. But it would last, and it was a high source of protein, and it filled your stomach in those bleak months. I don't think it was the tastiest thing, but it sustained them. So acorns were a major food source in addition to what they could harvest from the sea. Our stories in San Juan Capistrano tell us that we came from the north. And our migration story tells us we came from the village of Sehat. Sehat is near the confluence of Santa Ana and the Rio Hondo, or San Gabriel River. So what we now know as Whittier, Los Nietos was the ranch. Whittier, Santa Fe Springs area is where we are told that our migration story started. And again, it was a village that was prosperous. But the chief, Oriason, was seeing that it was time for people to move, to go to somewhere else. So he took his daughter Corone and a group of people, and they headed out and they came south and they followed the coast and they came to San Juan Capistrano area. They came to a village. They came to what would be a village. And when he left to return, he left his daughter Corone as the leader. So the word Corone became what we called our female leaders, became a Corone. And Corone, she wasn't a skinny little thing. She was a nice, big, rounded Native woman, and she wore, they said she made great noise when she walked because she wore shells hanging that you could hear her. And the village that she started was given the name Putirim, which means her navel, because they said she had a big belly. And so we say our mother village is Putirim, the navel. That's where we came from. And the legend is that when Corone died and they buried her, she became a huge, a big hill, a big lomo, a hill, loma, big hill. And the first night that the people were there, they were so exhausted, they just slept in a loose heap, a pile. And that's what was called an Acjachemen, a loose pile of things. And so we took our name Acjachemen from that. And then another village was settled short ways away called Acjachemen. And really, the native peoples, we didn't say, we didn't have a name for ourselves, so to speak. We referred to ourselves as the Payunkoichim, which means the Westerners, because we didn't know about Hawaii yet. But when you got to us, this was it. We just called ourselves the people of the West, the Westerners. We just referred to that. And there's this great diverse, in some of the states you have one tribe that dominates the whole state. But here in California, there's more diverse tribes, and we had physical barriers, geographic barriers. So there were mountains. There might be a whole nother tribe on the mountains that spoke a completely different language that you didn't even really encounter often. So California, we're real unique in those regards. And we most of us have Spanish surnames. We had already had over 100 years of contact with the Spanish, whereas some tribes, in the Midwest, they didn't see anybody until Lewis and Clark, which is barely 100 years ago. By that time, we had already had encounters. We had already adopted lifestyle ways. We had already become indoctrinated, I guess. I'm not going to say civilized. It's always a lot of people say, well, how can you be Catholic if you're Indian? But it's like, you can't deny that this is what became our way of life. When personally, like some of our tribe don't like to go to the mission. They see the mission as they just see the negative side of it, because we're finding out more and more. You know, the Spaniards did a lot of atrocities there, but they did a lot of good. They taught the people ways to live, a different lifestyle. But when I'm at the mission, I see it as this great testament to like the willpower and the strength and the integrity of my ancestors, you know, and then to be able to stand there and go, 200 years ago, you know, an actual relative of mine stood here and might have even placed this brick, you know, and so that's a real unique thing. And that's a real special thing to have. I always get irked when people say, oh, there's no history in California. You know, they're like, oh, in New York we have blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh, there is. I'm always quick to straighten them out, you know. And I always like to say, you know, well, where are your grandparents from? You know, where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? What about your great-grandparents? And that's where a lot of people get murky. Oh, they're, you know, German, Irish, Scotch, English, you know, that's a... But when I speak to school children, I always tell them, you know, they have their story, and the only place they're going to get their own unique story is to ask someone older from them. And a lot of when I see them later, I always send them home and say, ask someone older than you to tell you a story about your family, because that's the only way that you're going to get it, that you know that unique story that is yours. This area, we know, has been occupied for thousands of years. There's evidence, of course, the cogged stones, which are fascinating and only found here at Bolsa Chica. That's what makes Bolsa Chica so unique. The only other place in the world where anything similar is found is down in Chile. And now how that's a whole nother story. Yeah, right? The cogged stones, these are imitations of them. Of course, we apply the word cog because they look like a gear to us in our modern, but of course they weren't, and they usually don't show signs of wear. There's hypotheses, there's theories. It's believed that they were ceremonial. They could have been mounted. It's just one of those things we don't know. And but it was believed that Bolsa Chica was a factory. It's where they were produced in great volumes. There's been several that have been found here on the mesa that are in various states, not complete, but are in various states of completion. And there's been, I was fortunate enough to see a large cache of cogged stones and a pile of about 15 or 20 of them. But they were by a burial, so they were reburied. But it was really, you know, it's one of those mysteries that we don't know, but we do know that they have a very special significance, and it really puts Bolsa Chica here on the map as a very special ceremonial site and a special spot, because anybody going north and south would stop here. This would be a stopover point. One of the largest villages in the area was around the campus of Cal State Long Beach. It was called the village of Puvungna. And of course, where the Rancho Los Alamitos was a great freshwater spring. So you're going to find villages anywhere that there's water. So there was a large freshwater spring there. The name Puvungna, the NGNA, such as in Tahunga, Cahuenga, those are all Topanga, those are all native names. That means the place of, so Puvungna means the place where people gather, is what it was. And it's also a very special village site. I'm going to share with you another song, is what I'm going to. It's funny, you know, I was going to write everything down. I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to wing it. I was speaking to some school kids, and you know, because like sometimes a song, they're in your head, and you have to dig them out, or you're like, oh, how does that start? How does that start? It's funny when I'm singing with people. It's like, start it, and I'll go, oh yeah. But I was telling these school kids, okay, I'm going to sing a song, and then I was like, oh, I can't think of it. I know it, you know, and it's in there. And I said, you know, it's like my brain is a Rolodex, and I'm trying to thumb through it to find the song. And then what I got was 52 blank stares. And I thought, they have no idea what a Rolodex is. And so I said, you know what? It's like my brain is an iPod on shuffle. And then they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. So then I thought, I don't even know the last time I saw a Rolodex. Come think of it. Yeah, I was going to say, I forget. With all the business cards taped in. It was a good thing. You could physically touch them, though. This song is called the Ancestor Song. And we usually use it when we're just gathering, because we always, whenever we gather, we feel the people that have gone before us, like recent and ancient. But there's like this continuing line. And sometimes when I'm singing these old songs, I feel like the earth itself is like perking up and saying, whoa, well, you haven't heard that in a long time. You know, the very plants themselves. It's and the words just say, ancestors hear me, listen to my heart. And it's, you know, my mother was very active in our tribe. She was an elder. She's been up in the stars for 13 years now. And she just impressed on us the importance of you know, saying, oh, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to do that. Oh, that takes too much work. But just to listen to your heart and follow it. And so she just gave us all a sense, all of us kids, a sense that we have this family history, and it's a duty, but it's also a privilege to be able to share it and to just learn more about it and to share it and to keep it alive, keep the stories alive, keep the songs alive. It's funny too, because out of us 5 kids, there's a school teacher, marriage family counselor, occupational therapist, an RN. So we were just, that's how we were, you know, this is the type of careers that we've been led on, you know. So Hai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Tai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne. Tai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Tai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne. Tai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Tai hunu kwaneshun neshun, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne, Na hai kwaneshun, Na hai honne. Thank you. There is the most beautiful sunset going on out there. It's like I'm like looking out that window. It's the most beautiful color of orange out there, right over Pimu, which is Now I'm going to tell you the story of how Coyote stole the sun. Now every culture has a trickster. In some tribes it's the raven. Ours is Coyote. And Coyote lived up off the peak in a cave with his Uncle Eagle. And every morning at sunrise, Uncle Eagle would come out, stretch his wings, and he'd swale the morning skies around. And Coyote would run. Coyote would run down the canyon to where it became grasslands, to where the canyon met the ocean. And when he got to the ocean, he'd turn and he'd head south. And Coyote would run along the beach, and he'd run. And he'd want to keep running, but he knew the day was short, so he had to hurry back. So he'd run back. Well, one day, and he and Uncle were saying, wouldn't it be nice if the days were longer? One day, Coyote was running back, And it was getting dark, but he saw light over in a canyon. So Coyote was curious, so he climbed up and he peeked over and he looked down and he saw people. And there was a big fire. And the people were singing and dancing around the fire. But then he looked, and up in a tree, he saw the sun. And it was tied with cords. And he said, I'm going to investigate. So Coyote, now he could change into anything he wanted. So Coyote changed into a person. And he walked up to the people singing and dancing. And he joined the dance. And they were making a great circle going in and out around the fire. And so he danced up and he said to a woman, Sister, what a beautiful sun you have in the tree. Wouldn't it be nice if it stayed in the sky longer for all the people to enjoy? She said, No, that's our sun and we keep it there. So he danced back. And then he danced up and he said to this man, Brother, think how much bigger the plants that we eat would get if the sun was in the sky longer. And he said, No, 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 no. We like it just the way it is. Well, so just right then, Coyote said, I'm going to teach these people a lesson. I'm going to steal that sun. So Coyote looked around and then he saw the pile of firewood that the fire tender was using to throw on. So what he did was he stepped back and then he turned himself into a log. And it wasn't just any log. It was ripe with sap and dry bark, and he made sure that he laid right on top of the pile. Well, the firekeeper came back to pick up the log. He said, Oh, this is going to burn all night. Look at this log. Where did this come from? And he took it and threw it on the fire. And the minute he did, there was the greatest flash. Just a bright flash that caused everyone to cover their eyes and turn. And in that instant, Coyote turned back into himself. He jumped up, chewed through those ropes. He grabbed the sun and he took off. Well, the people, they were still reeling from that bright flash. They didn't know what went on. And they looked up. Fire. They looked up. Sun. The last thing they saw was Coyote's tail, and a great cry went up. It was Coyote. Get him. He stole our sun. And the people took off running after Coyote. Well, Coyote is running with the sun in his mouth. He ran. He started calling, Uncle, open the cave. Now the cave had a big stone that they used as a door. Uncle, open the cave. Well, Uncle heard the commotion. He could hear people yelling or heard Coyote. He pushed back the stone, and as soon as he did, in came Coyote with the sun in his mouth, and they pushed the cave door closed. Now the people, they were banging on the door. Coyote, give us that sun. And Coyote said, People, you're greedy and you're slow. I have the sun. Go home, go home. Oh, and the people kicked the earth and walked back to their village. Well, now, Coyote didn't think ahead. Now, inside the cave, it was getting a little warm. And Uncle said, Coyote, why'd you bring the sun in here? What? He said, you need to put it up. Go put it up. Well, so Coyote climbs up to the top of the cave. Here, Uncle, here. No, no, Coyote. Up, up. Put it way up. Uncle said, Coyote, you need to take the sun up to the highest mountain. And when you get to the top, jump as high as you can and stretch and put that sun back in the sky. So Coyote took off running, got to the top of the peak, jumped and stretched as far as he could and put the sun in the sky. And then he walked home because he knew the day was going to be longer and he didn't have to rush. Now those people, where Coyote put the sun, he made sure that the shadows fell on their village the whole time. And they say now when you're up on the side of the mountains, you'll see some stones that are, about this high, and some are shaped like this, some are shaped like this. Well, they say those are the people who are so mad and cold. And in the shadows, they just turned into stone where they stand today. Well, that's how Coyote stole the sun. A lot of oral tradition is what almost every culture survived on or lived, or that's how you learned who you were. I have a friend who was born and raised when he he tells me the stories. I'm like, really, in this day and age? But he's from a little village in Mexico. He grew up with no electricity, and there were 8 kids in 2 bedrooms, and it's really fascinating just to hear his stories. And he's like, and you say, how did you live like that? It's like, well, what are the options? It's like, how did I live with all sisters and 1 telephone? It's just, you just do. You don't think anything of it. You just do. And but he was telling me that his favorite part of growing up was in the evening. They had lanterns, but at night after dinner, everyone would sit at the table, and Grandma would talk, and Grandma would tell stories, and Grandma would tell family stories. She'd tell old stories. She'd tell what that noise was outside, so that nobody wanted to go outside at night. Every story. But an oral tradition is it's a real treasure, and a lot of the things that I have heard, the songs that I have heard, stories I've heard, have all been gifted to me or told to me, and I ask the permission of the person that gave it to me if I'm permitted to share it when I have learned it, the song properly, or when I have learned the story, then I'm able to go out and share it. So that's a real nice gift that I have been. These are abalones from San Nicolas Island, and I went there with my mother on a special. We were guests of the National Park Service, and my mom said, I want to take an abalone. And the Park Service said, no, you can't. And she said, you're going to tell an 82-year-old woman. So there was a little rule broken there. But these came from San Nicolas Island, which of course is the home of Juana Maria, who was later made into the story of the island of the blue dolphin. But she did exist and live on that island for all those years, and then she was brought to Mission Santa Barbara. But San Nicolas Island is one that was occupied. We find archaeological evidence on almost all the major Channel Islands that there were big population centers. The Chumash traveled back and forth. They called their plank canoe a tomul, and they could be 20, 25 feet. Great redwood plank canoes. And that pesky tar that bubbles up, excuse me, it makes a great sealant for the canoes. And then also that tar that bubbles up, when you heat it, it becomes pliable, and it would line a woven basket, and that would become a water basket. So the tar was used, the pitch was used, but they would, those canoes, also the tiots, were the canoes of the Gabrielino Tongva called them tiots. And those great plank canoes were sewn together. There were no nails because they didn't have nails, but these great planks of wood were fitted together so tight and then lashed and then sealed. And there has been a resurgence in the maritime culture in both among the Tongva. They have started a Tiot society, and the Tomul have a Chumash maritime culture. And once a year, every September, they actually paddle the canoes out to Santa Cruz Island. And they have an encampment. And I've been fortunate to attend 3 times, and it's so great because it's like native camp for the week. That just everybody goes over and waits, and the kids make a signal fire down by the beach, and then they have the job of sitting up at the top of the cliff and looking for the waiting, because they leave at early in the morning before the sun is up. They paddle out from the harbor at Ventura. And so everyone is in camp just waiting to hear the call from the children. And then everybody goes down to the beach. All the young people swim out to the Tiot, and then everybody carries it in. And then there's a great feast, and it's just a really special time. And there's every generation of family attends, and that's every September that occurs. This year, the event occurred, but the tumul needed some repairs, and it wasn't repaired in time. So unfortunately, she did not make the trip, but everybody else did without her. The shuffle, the Rolodex is on shuffle for a song for you. I know what song I'm going to do for you. I was fortunate enough to, we were contacted by the Smithsonian, and they said, in the 1920s, the Smithsonian sent a ethnographer, and he traveled through California because they could see that these languages were shrinking, that people were losing these languages. So they sent this ethnographer named J.P. Harrington, and he traveled in an old Model T, and he would visit these villages, and he would talk to someone who spoke the language, and he would write down everything they said. And he had this recording device that used wax cylinders, if you can imagine it. So it recorded. So he would find this person, and he would spend days with them and say, okay, tell me this story. What are you doing? How do you make this? What is that song? So we were contacted by the Smithsonian, and they said, we have these wax cylinders that are down in the basement that are marked from San Juan Capistrano. And so we don't have the money to do anything with them, but we'd like you to know they're here. And so what we did was a delegation of us went to the Smithsonian to hear them for the first time. And we were able to get funds together and to have them transcribed. And so what he referred to the person he talked to as his informant. He'd call it his informant. And he was a really interesting character because he thought people were going to steal his work. So he kind of created his own language to write things in. It's really difficult to decipher. And then when he'd be visiting someone's home, he'd say, I'm going to leave this chest of things here and I'll come back for it. So there's people that are finding like parts of his work all throughout the state of where he hid these stashes of, he was real suspicious of people. But so we were able to listen to these wax cylinders, and the informant he was using, her name was Anastasia Mahel, and she was the mother of Aku, who was the bell ringer at Mission San Juan Capistrano. And she was one of the last fluent speakers who had been born with the language and continued to speak it through her whole life. And so he spent the day with her, got her stories, got her songs, and it is said that they'd get so tired because he'd say it again, say it again. You know, they'd be going about their business, and then he'd like, say it again, say it again, say it again. But what he did leave was this incredible treasure of language and stories. And listening to that wax cylinder was like, you know, someone coming back from, you know, the turn of the century, and then hearing it directly from them. And so this song that we were taught by a long gone ancestor, and she explained it too, which was really great. But it's a morning song. It's a morning mockingbird song, and so we didn't get to ask her permission because she wasn't there. But we were really fortunate to learn this song, and in that manner, with modern technology bringing it to us. And those wax cylinders, they're like pretty much disintegrating. So it was like an SOS call from the Smithsonian. They're like, these cylinders aren't going to last much longer. And so not only our tribe, but several other tribes were able to go listen to them, and then have them cleaned up because they were real crackly, but have them cleaned up. And then at the time they were put onto reel-to-reel tapes, and then onto cassettes, and now they're on CDs. And so there was a time, you know, factor, because there's still a few elders that speak languages in some of the reservations out in the desert. And so they were able to hear this and go, oh, I know that song. Oh, I know that story. You know, I haven't heard that in so long. So this is a song that Anastasia Mahel taught to us. Nanka nanka nako we, nanka nanka nako we. Nonka nonka nako we, Yamai mo, mokomole wem, taka wem, ashatare lano mona e, aketara leno se a e, nunca nunca nako we. Yamai mo, mokomole wem, taka wem, nunca nunca nako we. Nunca, nunca, nako we. Yamai mo, mokomole weam, taka weam, ashatare lano mona e, aketare lano se a e. Nunca, nunca, nako we. Yamai mo, mokomole weam, taka weam. A lot of the songs are sang in fours for the four directions. So you always sing a round of four. But it was pretty, I mean, back in the old days, they would sing all night, make a fire and sing all night. You'd hear the rattle, the clapper sticks going all night long. Let's see. I'm going to tell you the story of how the condor got his head painted red. And this story was shared with me by a member of our tribe who heard it from his grandfather. And then his family gave me permission to tell this story. So it had been a long, cold winter, but spring was arriving. And the plants were just starting to bloom. Animals were waking out of hibernation. And old Grandmother Turtle was out for a morning walk. No, Grandmother Turtle nobody knew how old she was. She just always was. And she was the mother of all. Everyone could trace their lineage to Grandmother Turtle. Now, Grandmother Turtle had been hungry, and she was walking up the dry creek. And she looked up, and she saw the prickly pear cactus was in bloom. And she saw those red fruits. Oh, and she started licking her lips. And Grandmother Turtle moved as fast as she could for a turtle and started making her way up to that prickly pear. Well, she lost her footing on a rock and she flipped. And there she was, wedged between two stones on her back. Well, Grandmother Turtle thought, well, certainly one of my children will help me. She looked. Over on the side, she could see the cave of the bear. She called him, Hunwit, Hunwit, come help me. But it was still early in the spring and she could hear him snoring. So she knew Bear would be no help. Well, she saw Mother Quail. Oh, she called out, Quail, Quail, come help me. But Mother Quail, she had just had a hatchling and she was so busy with all her little ones, she didn't even hear and they disappeared into the brush. Well, she saw Badger. And then she thought again, he's always grumpy. I won't even bother with him. She saw Skunk. She didn't want to go there. She called out to Mountain Lion, oh, Mountain Lion, come, help me. But she just saw his tail. She knew he didn't move much during the day. He was just out at night. So she looked to the sun and she said, Temet, is this it? Is this how it's going to be for me? How am I going to get help? And Temet, the sun, said, Grandmother, use your shell, use your shell. And so she turned her shell a little, and with the reflection of the sun, it set off a great beam of light up into the sky. And who was circling up in the sky but Condor, had his great wings spread. Now at this time, Condor looked very much like an eagle. You couldn't tell the difference. They both had white heads and dark bodies. So Condor was circling, and he saw this reflection. So he came down to see what it was. He came down. He said, Grandmother Turtle, how did you get like that? And she said, oh, Condor, thank you. If you help me, I will give you a reward beyond anything you've ever seen. So Condor took his great wings and he picked up Grandmother Turtle and he picked her up. Oh, and she began to pick those big, ripe, juicy fruits off of the prickly pear. And he set her down and she ate them and they were dripping down. The juice was down her hands and she ate her fill. And then she said, Condor, come to me, kneel before me. And she took her hands and she placed them on his head, on his white feathered head. And she said, Condor, You from now on will be the ruler of the sky. You will greet the sun every morning. You will see before anyone else what is coming ahead. This is my reward to you, and this will be passed on to the generations after you. You and all your descendants will be known as the rulers of the sky, and when people see you in the sky, they will know it's you. And when she took her hands off, that red juice had stained his head red. And that's why condor today, you see them, you know it's a condor. He has that red painted head, and that was his gift from Grandmother Turtle. I actually have the opportunity to turn it into a children's story, and there's a great book company. It's called Heyday Books. It's out of Berkeley, and they're really great. They publish News from Native California, which is a monthly, quarterly magazine that tells you all about everything that's going on with Native Californians, any event, and there's always great stories. It's a really great resource, and they really support any Native author or writer. But I was talking conversations with the publisher at the Storytellers conference, and so I'm going to work with him and possibly turn some of these stories into children's stories, which will be, yeah. I'm looking forward to that when I get the time. Right, add it to the list. Yeah, we'll just that should be a priority. That will be a priority. I promise you. The Olivellas, which I picked some of these at, believe it or not, Newport Coast. Olivellas were one of the most prevalent shells throughout here. These are found all on the mesa. They're found in burials. They're found throughout. And Olivella was a currency, was a type of money throughout California, along with the dentillium. Up north, they used dentillium, and they had tattoos on their arm that were certain lengths that told currency. So they just held it there, and that was how they decided the value of something. Pretty fascinating. This was made. One thing that is when there is a discovery of something archaeologically, Native people do have access to it. So a lot of these wonderful things that we're recreating are found in like drawings, or they've been excavated at a site, and then we've been able to have access to it. And so there's a lot of artists who are recreating traditional things, and that's what this is. My one cousin is really gifted, and this is steatite, which is found on Catalina. There's a huge steatite soapstone quarry, and traditionally we used soapstone for making like a griddle, a cooking stone, because it's easy to work with. It's soft, but you just set it on the fire, so it was a cooking stone. So soapstone is there's a huge quarry on Catalina, and we find that same soapstone throughout the coast here, even traded up the river inland. Farther inland, they have Catalina soapstone is being found, and so we know that it's brought back and forth by the teats, the canoes, and a lot of soapstone is found throughout Southern California. I haven't done a song with the clapping stick yet. When you see a dolphin, I told you the dolphins, when you see a dolphin, it's always a good luck sign. It's always things are going to be good if you see a dolphin. You can sit there and wait. It's a good time, you say sometimes, I'm going to go look for a dolphin. And you just sit by the ocean, and you think about stuff. And then when the dolphin does show, it's a good feeling. This is a dolphin calling song. Ik, mik, nik, mik, po, wee. Ik, mik, mak, nik, po, wee. Ik, mik, mak, nik, po, wee. Alakoi, 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 alakoi. Ik, mik, mak, nik, po, wee. Ik, mik, mak, nik, po, wee. Ik, mik, mak, nik, po, wee. Alakoi, 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 alakoi. Alakoi is a word for dolphin. There's a great, we've learned that, so we're trying to get preschoolers from our tribe used to introducing words. So we're teaching the parents, rather than saying the dolphin, say alakoi. Rather, just you start with words, just like introducing any language. Some tribes have done a great job with that, and they now have total immersion language programs for their school kids. The Hawaiians are really fortunate. I've been able to travel to Hawaii, and they have schools that are taught in 100% Hawaiian, in addition to English, but they're learning. And it's great because the kids are really into it. The kids are really, it keeps them out of trouble because they're doing language classes, and it's kind of become, it's just become really cool. You're cool if you're taking the language class, so they embrace it, and so that's been a real exciting. Every year they do a language conference. It's called Breath of Life, and it's people from all the tribes throughout California who are working on reviving their languages. So it's a week-long or a weekend long, but you share stories. How are you doing this? What are you doing? Oh, that's a great idea, And now modern technology has taken it to a whole nother level, because there's actually an app in the Luiseño language that you can pull up and it'll translate words for you. So. Yeah, it's really crazy. Who would have ever thought? We thought we were going to have to be digging through the Rolodex, but now here we've got an app for it that brings it right there. I'm going to tell you a story that again takes place in San Juan Capistrano, and this is actually a relatively recent story that took place in the 1840s, actually. And it's still told around San Juan Capistrano. It was told by Father O'Sullivan in his book Capistrano Nights. He's the first one that put it down, but to pen to paper. But it's a story, and it's called "How Doña Polonia and the Children Brought the Rain." And Doña Polonia was a Acjachemen woman, and she lived in San Juan Capistrano. In the Los Rios district, and her home is there. The Montanez adobe is still there. You can visit it, and it had a great garden. Still has the thick walls, and Doña Polonia was at this time the mission had no priest assigned, so she took over the job of teaching the kids the catechism. But she was also a curandera, or a healer. So she was the one that knew all the plants. She knew the old ways, but she taught the Catholic religion as she saw it, but she kind of combined it with her traditional ways as well. So, and she was a midwife. So everybody in San Juan Capistrano at that time entered the world through her hands. So Doña Polonia lived in her adobe in the Los Rios district. Everyone knew her. Everyone had been birthed by her, and she was the one they went to when they'd say, "Doña, the baby's coughing all night. What can I do?" And she'd say, "Go pick those yellow flowers down by the creek, boil them, make a tea." She knew the old ways, and she was the one that everyone relied on. Now it had been a dry winter. There had been no rain. It was the driest anyone could remember. Here it was spring, but the hills were dry as the middle of summer. The cattle up in the canyons, Mission Viejo, Trabuco, the canyons up there, the cattle were dying. Crops weren't growing, and everyone didn't know what to do. So the townspeople had a meeting. They all had a meeting, and everyone came in and said, "Well, what are we going to do? How can we, And someone in the back of the room said, "Well, let's have Doña Polonia take the children and pray for rain." And the people said, "Well, we've tried everything else. Why not?" And so Doña Polonia gathered the children the next morning, and they cut long sticks off the willow branch, and they tied long pieces of white fabric at the end. And then they took two, and she made a palanca, which is kind of like a stretcher that you carry on your shoulders. And she took four of the biggest boys, and she had them put it on the shoulders. And then she asked each of the children to bring a gift to put on it. So one brought her favorite gold earrings. Another brought a lucky coin. So one brought some shells. Another brought some dried sage that he had picked. And she put them all on it. And then in the middle, she put a statue of her favorite saint. And then she told the children, we're going to sing and we're going to pray and we're going to walk. We're going to walk up through town and we're going to go up the canyon. And we might even get all the way out to the point that's named after Richard Henry Dana down at the end of the canyon. So they took off and they started with a song, the kids waving their flags. They made quite a sight. They came right down the middle of Camino Capistrano, right through the middle of town. And the old bell ringer saw him. He start pulling, the bells start ringing. Shopkeepers came out to greet the children and wave. They got the biggest laughs when they passed the cantina and the saloon. Those people came out, not a cloud in the sky. Doña Polonia said, don't listen to them. And the children made their way up out of town. They followed the road up through the pastures. People would look up and all they could see was a little cloud of dust from their little feet making their way up. They reached the place of the Bolsa de la Playa, that's the mouth of the ocean, little canyon, and they started down. Well, as they made their way down that canyon, a fog started to blow in. And then a little wind came. There was a little remolino, that's a little whirlwind, and it blew. And the kids got chilled. And she said, keep singing, children, keep singing. So they raised their voice, and by the time they finished that song, a great rain had started. And it kept raining, and it kept raining. And then it started getting dark, and the parents in town were starting to get worried. So a rescue wagon went out. They took out a wagon with the horses and they got down to the beach and the kids were singing and it was pouring rain and they loaded them all in and all the parents were gathered in the middle of town. They were worried. And then as the wagon came in, the great cry went up and the people were so glad it was raining and they said, Doña Polonia, thank you, thank you. And she said, don't thank me. It was the children, and everybody hugged in a great big circle. But there's still times, and for years people would say, remember that time, Doña Polonia, they had to go rescue him. Our time, where it goes. Is, you know what, for this one, I'm going to get helpers right here from my front row. All right, what we're going to sing is the traveling song, which is always that. People are traveling. I see this line of people on PCH that are traveling. Somebody's always traveling. We're all going to be traveling in a little while. We all know someone, I'm sure we have a friend or a loved one who might be leaving this world. They're going to be traveling, so we'll sing for them too. There's people traveling all over, and this is a song that we usually end with. And often, after a funeral, we'll sing it as we're walking away, because it's a good, kind of like New Orleans, you know, they want a happy song at the end. We're taking care of business, and someone's got traveling to do. So everybody's got some traveling. So this is a traveling song. Okay, follow my lead, all right? Musicians, ready? All right. Okay now, okay now, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away. Okay now, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away, ho, wait away. Oh, wait away, wait away, oh, wait away, oh, wait away. Okay now, wait away, oh, wait away, oh, wait away, oh, wait away, oh, wait away, wait away, oh, wait away, oh, wait away. Okay now, wait away. Wait away, oh, wait away, oh, right. Thank you. Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for joining me today.